Donald Trump is facing new criticism after suggesting that the 2024 election could be the nation's last election if he wins in November. Trump made the comment in Florida at Turning Point Action's Believers Summit.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Donald Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, has doubled down on his remarks that the Democratic Party is being led by what he called childless cat ladies. Vance made the original comment on the Tucker Carlson show in 2021.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
On Friday, J.D. Vance appeared on the Megyn Kelly show and defended his remarks.
Obviously, it was a sarcastic comment. I've got nothing against cats. I've got nothing against dogs. I've got one dog at home, and I love him, Megyn. But look, this is not, people are focusing so much on the sarcasm and not on the substance of what I actually said. And the substance of what I said, Megyn, I'm sorry, it's true.
Election news, Kamala Harris has announced her presidential campaign raised more than $200 million over the past week. That's more than President Biden had raised in the first 3 months of the year when he was still running for re-election. Meanwhile, some of the Democratic Party's biggest donors, including LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, are openly pushing Harris to fire Federal Trade Commission Chair Lina Khan, who's led Biden's antitrust efforts. Hoffman sits on the board of Microsoft, which was sued by the FTC. President Biden's called for major reforms to the U.S. Supreme Court, including 18-year term limits, an enforceable code of ethics, and a constitutional amendment that would bar immunity for presidents who committed crimes while in office. In a new op-ed for The Washington Post, President Biden also cited the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade by the far-right court. The president did not, however, call for expanding the Supreme Court, which many Democrats and judicial reform experts have done. In Northern California, the rapidly spreading Park Fire has burned over 550 square miles, an area larger than the size of Los Angeles. The Park Fire is already one of the 10 largest fires in California's history and has now become the largest active wildfire in the United States, surpassing the raging Durkee Fire in nearby eastern Oregon. In other climate news, police in New York City on Saturday arrested 59 protesters outside the home of Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser. The protest was part of Summer of Heat, a series of nonviolent direct action protests to end fossil fuel financing. Police have raided and cleared a pro-Palestinian encampment outside the home of Secretary of State Antony Blinken in McLean, Virginia. The encampment has been set up for 183 days to demand an end to U.S. support for Israel's war on Gaza. And in news from the Paris Olympics, Wassim Aboussal received thunderous applause on Sunday as he became the first Palestinian boxer to participate in the Olympics. During the Olympic opening ceremony Friday, Aboussal wore a shirt showing children being bombed in defiance of strict rules against making so-called political statements. After losing his match on Sunday, Aboussal said the Olympic Games are already a victory for Palestine. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has doubled down on his remarks that the Democratic Party is being led by what he called childless cat ladies. Vance made the original comment on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox at the time in 2021.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Kamala Harris is a stepmother of 2 children. At the time of Vance's remarks, Pete Buttigieg was in the middle of the adoption process and welcomed his twins shortly afterwards with his husband while serving as Secretary of Transportation. Also in 2021, Vance advocated for a voting system that would allow people with children to cast more votes on behalf of their children. Vance addressed the controversy Friday in a new interview on the Megyn Kelly show on SiriusXM, defending his remarks and repeating his claim that Democrats are anti-family.
Obviously, it was a sarcastic comment. I've got nothing against cats. I've got nothing against dogs. I've got 1 dog at home, and I love them, Megyn. But look, this is not, people are focusing so much on the sarcasm and not on the substance of what I actually said. And the substance of what I said, Megyn, I'm sorry, it's true.
This comes as CNN reports Ohio Senator J.D. Vance has been historically unpopular and currently has a net favorability rating of negative 16 points in his home region, compared to negative 5-point net favorability in nationwide polls. For more, we're joined by 2 guests. In San Francisco, Renee Bracey Sherman is with us, reproductive justice activist, abortion storyteller, and writer, who's founder and co-founder, co-executive director of We Testify. Her new article in Teen Vogue is headlined, J.D. Vance doesn't want all women to be trad wives, just white women. Her forthcoming book is titled Liberating Abortion, Claiming Our History, Sharing Our Stories, and Building the Reproductive Future We Deserve. And in New York, Jessica Gross is with us, opinion writer for the New York Times, whose new piece is headlined, Attacking Kamala Harris for Not Having Kids Will Backfire. Not to mention it's not true. Her other recent piece is headlined, Traditional Marriage for Thee, but Not for J.D. Vance. Gross is the author of Screaming on the Inside, The Unsustainability of American Motherhood. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Jessica Gross, let's begin with you. If you can respond to this, these comments that, yes, that Senator J.D. Vance made when he was running for Senate in 2021, but did not back down when talking about what he said just recently.
Well, I don't think whether or not you have children affects whether or not you support pro-family policies for the United States. We saw Build Back Better fail, and that had many provisions that were extremely pro-family. And you can argue, okay, well, maybe that wasn't the best bill. We don't see Republicans supporting things like paid leave, like childcare. We don't see them out front in terms of pro-family policy. And so I just find the entire line of attack to be ridiculous and also unpopular, insulting people who are deeply involved in children's lives, whether or not they happen to be those children's biological parents. Voters of all political persuasions have that background, and why are you offending them for no reason?
This is another newly uncovered video from 2021 in which J.D. Vance blames critical media coverage of him on journalists who are miserable, childless adults.
Many of the most unhappy and most miserable and most angry people in our media are childless adults. Let's just be honest about it. Because look, the elite model, the American dream to the elites is get as much credentials as you can, get as much money as you can, get the most prestigious job, and that's where you're going to find your self-worth. But I got to be honest with you, most of our mainstream reporters are not impressive enough to find a lot of self-meaning in their jobs. They're just not good enough at it.
Jessica Gross, your response and how people are responding to this and where this line, where his attacks are coming from.
Well, first, I want to point out that I had children younger than he did. So, you know, the media is not just filled with people who don't have children who are bitter. I think it is a way to paint Republicans as the pro-family party, and the media, which he categorizes as liberal, well, it contains people with all sorts of backgrounds, as being anti-family and being bitter and trying to encourage other people to be bitter, when that couldn't be further from the truth.
I wanted to quote Pete Buttigieg, play a clip, who responded to J.D. Vance's remarks in a recent CNN interview.
The really sad thing is he said that after Chasten and I had been through a fairly heartbreaking setback in our adoption journey. He couldn't have known that, but maybe that's why you shouldn't be talking about other people's children. And it's not about his kids or my kids or the vice president's family. It's about your family, people's families whose well-being will depend on whether we go into a future led by somebody like Kamala Harris, who is focused on expanding the prosperity, the freedom, the well-being of our families. And by the way, especially if you have kids and you're worried about climate, choosing between a party that has a plan on climate that creates jobs and a party that still calls it a hoax, even as we went through the hottest day in world history. Or do you want your children to grow up in a country defined by a return to the chaos and recrimination and cruelty that was the hallmark of the Trump era?
Meanwhile, Friends actress Jennifer Aniston was one of many who criticized Vance's comment. She posted on Instagram, quote, "I truly can't believe this is coming from a potential VP of the United States. All I can say is, Mr. Vance, I pray your daughter is fortunate enough to bear children of her own one day. I hope she will not need to turn to IVF as a second option, because you are trying to take that away from her too," unquote. Vance responded to Aniston in an interview with Megyn Kelly saying, well, first of all, that's disgusting because my daughter's 2 years old. Second of all, if she had fertility problems, as I said in the speech, I would try everything I could to try to help her because I believe families and babies are a good thing. Jessica Gross, if you can respond to that, and also his stance on IVF in the Senate.
Well, I think he voted against a bill that would have enshrined protections for IVF. So that shows me that if it becomes a partisan issue, we know which side he's on. And I think just having people being supportive of all different kinds of families is a much more appealing idea than trying to divide us by what our family status may or may not be. And if we want a future where people can have the families that they want and build the families they want, I don't really see him being broadly supportive of the policies that would help that. To give him a little bit of credit, he is supportive of a child tax credit, but he also accused Kamala Harris of not being supportive of a child tax credit when she has been out front of being extremely supportive of that policy.
You also note, if elected, Harris will not be the first American president with no biological children. You write, there were 5 others: George Washington, James Madison, Andrew Jackson, James Polk, and James Buchanan. Warren Harding had a child out of wedlock, publicly denied paternity. That he was the father was confirmed by DNA testing almost a century later. If you can talk about the sexist double standard, Jessica.
Sure. I think there's still this idea that if you are a woman, unless you bear children, you are somehow less than. And I think it just devalues all of us to divide us this way, to put our worth into whether we are able to or desiring of having our own children. I just can't think of something that is less American than not giving people the freedom to decide what they want to do with their bodies and their family building. So I just think it has absolutely nothing to do with how you legislate. People, at baseline, any legislator should be able to come up with policy and support policy that has nothing to do with them, because that's what being a legislator is. It is representing all of the people, whether they voted for you or not. And so I think whether someone has biological children is completely irrelevant to whether or not they're a good leader. And there's a history of people being terrible parents who are also leaders, and we don't think of them as any less than in terms of whether or not they were good legislators. It is a completely different question.
Mm.